Even though the Gilded Age provided much success for America and boomed the industrial industry, modernism plowed through society, bringing corruption, overcrowding, a lack of moral, and a completely redefined outlook on what was appropriate in life. Big businesses prosecuted workers and emitted a toxic atmosphere in the workplace. Women were highly disregarded and were not held to high standards in society. They were tossed to the side and expected to act, dress, and behave a certain way. Despite the fact that they were able to attend dinners with their husbands and roam around in the daytime, every single action was critically analyzed. As a result, she has to find some mean between displaying class and status and demonstrating etiquette and propriety. Even the slightest bit of skin shown to the public could define women as a prostitute. Big business owners owned huge operations and created an environment where women were not welcomed. Anthony Comstock in particular, who was the founder of the New York Society for Suppression of Vice, used his power to oppress women. The institution was dedicated to mandating the morality of the public. With guidance from the New York legislature, Anthony and his company were able to dominate the social sphere and emit a crude world for women. The Comstock Law created an environment for women that compromised their personal liberties. However, it united women against an oppressive government and led to a continuous fight against restrictions over their own bodies. Catherine Booth, the creator of the Salvation Army and advocate for women's equality to match those events, said, "The first and most common objection urged against the public exercises of women is that they are unnatural and unfeminine. This ideology was used to prevent full integration of women into society. They were deemed as uncivilized creatures that distracted men from their work. This attitude towards women was carried through the 18th and 19th centuries. The most important responsibility for a woman was to have children for their husbands." Anthony Comstock did not approve of the display of women's bodies and their ability to prevent themselves from having children. The Comstock Law made it illegal to sell or distribute materials that could prevent conception and could be used for abortion. It was created because there was a rising concern about obscenity, extramarital sex, marriage, the changing role of women, and the increasing population of the lower class. Believing access to birth control promoted greater sexual activity outside of marriage. They lobbied Congress to pass a bill prohibiting the mailing of birth control information and devices, as well as abortion information through the U.S. mail. They also hoped to prohibit the shipment of birth control items from state to state. Anthony Comstock created support for the law by getting people to see that women had a certain role in life and that these devices they used to stop themselves from having babies was violating that role. He also received help from the Catholic Church because it was against their religion for women to have an abortion and use other medicines to stop pregnancies. This marked the start of other birth control and abortion laws. Even though the government was questioning if this law was a violation of their citizens' privacy, it was still passed. Women started to worry about their reproduction rights being taken away. Some women felt like they had a right to control their own bodies. Therefore, they took a stand and fought back against this law in organizations such as AWSA and NWSA. These associations were later involved in the women's suffrage movement and had put a start to feminism. The women were either forced by their husbands to stand down or were looked down upon when taking a stand. Therefore, a compromise was in place. The Comstock Laws banned things such as contraception, birth control, books, school curriculum, and magazines. Comstock would go on to prosecute 3,500 individuals, only 10% being found as guilty, and by the end, the law would ban 120 tons of literature from the U.S. mail. This included several modern authors being censored under the new law for inappropriate material. Although these restrictions still existed, a movement called the Women's Suffrage Movement, led by Victoria C. Woodhull and other women, protested against unfair laws and policies placed by Comstock Law. Unfortunately, Margaret Sanger, a leading activist for women's rights, faced prosecutions for handing out flyers in her local mall in 1914. Her husband also would face punishment for not telling the whereabouts of Miss Sanger. More and more women were realizing that their rights were being compromised. They were either forced to settle with such ideals or stand up for themselves by taking action. The editor of Free Thought Journal, known as a Truth Seeker, stated that the majority of the members at the National Liberal League Convention in 1876 voted to seek repeal of the Comstock Laws, not on the grounds that the specific right to communicate about reproductive control should be defended, but on the grounds that freedom of speech and freedom of the press should not be restricted.
The following interview will be demonstrating the effects of the Comstock Law.
Dr. Abramson, thank you for meeting with me today. Would you mind answering a few questions regarding women's rights in conjunction with the Comstock Laws?
Yeah, no problem.
First off, why was the Comstock Law originally created?
Well, it was originally created in order to stop obscenity in the town, and it was in order to stop masturbation, as he felt it was spilling their seed and it was corrupting the youth.
Interesting. And what specific actions were taken to fight against the Comstock Law?
Well, they basically banned any access to birth control methods such as condoms or abortions. They also made sure that anything pornographic in material was taken away and forbidden. A lot of like-minded companies also did the same with this, feeling that it was a sin to masturbate.
Interesting. And what particularly did people find unconstitutional and invasive about these laws?
Well, mostly people felt that it was invasive because it invaded their rights to literature. Any basic literature was used. They dissented medical and philosophical opinions. Overall, it just affected anything they had in their rights.
Interesting. Well, thank you for meeting with me.
Anytime.
Women decided to fight back against the Comstock Law by speaking out. They fought for their rights to stop unwanted births so that they could have sex without having children. Oftentimes, children died due to starvation because their mothers were unable to support them. When the women fought against the Comstock Law, they faced a lot of controversy, particularly from religious groups. These religious groups thought that birth control was an evil force that was unlawful. Despite the legislation and penalties placed on these women, a select few individuals joined the fight to end this discrimination. One of these people were Margaret Sanger, born on September 14, 1978, in Corning, New York. In 1910, she started a publication promoting a woman's right to birth control in Manhattan, New York, which immersed her in a radicalized neighborhood. She was surrounded by other progressives like Upton Sinclair, who wrote The Jungle, and anarchist Emma Goldman. Sanger started a campaign to educate women about sex in 1912 by writing a newspaper column called What Every Girl Should Know. Her beliefs and practices were trumped by the Comstock Law that led her to flee the United States. Once she returned in 1915, she founded the American Birth Control League that gave immigrant women access to birth control. This organization eventually would lead to the creation of Planned Parenthood. But perhaps one of the most important things about these laws were that they brought a sense of community to women and united them against a greater evil power.
In Comstocking America, Margaret Sanger highlights America stands in the eyes of the younger generations of the various countries of Europe as a great hope and inspiration for the development of a free race. Is there surprise and disappointment to learn that an American woman, born on American soil, must leave the land of the free and home of the brave to escape imprisonment for discussing the subject of family limitation.
Recent legislation has been passed that denies women insurance on coverage for contraception. The New York Times explains that at the same time, the Department of Health and Human Services issued 2 rules rolling back a federal requirement that employers must include birth control coverage in their health insurance plans. The Affordable Care Act created under the Obama administration has now been completely neglected. Amongst all other things, religion is still a guiding force in this battle to achieve complete protection of a woman's body, because many religions do not support the principles of birth control and other contraceptive methods.
People have started to protest for these rights, as shown in the following video.
A controversial Obama-era healthcare mandate could soon be repealed. Many religious organizations argue that they shouldn't be required to facilitate something that goes against their beliefs. Women's advocacy groups said all women deserve access to contraception and that it should be treated like any other preventive medical care option. President Trump pledged to repeal the rule on the campaign trail.
The Trump administration believes that its actions towards the repeal of the Affordable Care Act will have no effect on over 99.9% of the 165 million women in the United States. They argue that women with low incomes will still have access to contraception through community health programs. However, the administration has made no moves to keep its motives of cutting government spending on programs that help women. Other groups like the Center for Reproductive Rights and the National Women's Law Center want to challenge Trump in court. Despite the promise Trump has said, his administration is not working towards protecting women's rights. The Comstock laws were just the beginning of the long-lasting argument that will continue to question the minds of society forever.